Welcome to another episode of Daily Devotion. Today we're looking at 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 1 to 11. So in today's passage, the focus is on talking about the false teachers and false prophets and talking about how God will punish those false prophets and false teachers. But on the other hand, God will save the godly people. Let's start the Bible reading first.
2 Peter chapter 2. But there were also false prophets among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you. They will secretly introduce destructive heresies, even denying the sovereign Lord who bought them, bringing swift destruction on themselves. Many will follow their depraved conduct and will bring the way of truth into disrepute. In their greed, these teachers will exploit you with fabricated stories. Their condemnation has long been hanging over them, and their destruction has not been sleeping. If God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment, if he did not spare the ancient world when he brought the flood on its ungodly people, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others, if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah by burning them to ashes and made them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly, if he rescued Lot, a righteous man who was distressed by the depraved conduct of the lawless, for that righteous man, living among them day after day, was tormented in his righteous soul by the lawless deeds he saw and heard. If this is, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials and to hold the unrighteous for punishment on the day of judgment. This is especially true of those who follow the corrupt desire of the flesh and despise authority. Bold and arrogant, they are not afraid to heap abuse on celestial beings. Yet even angels, although they are stronger and more powerful, do not heap abuse on such beings when bringing judgment on them from the Lord.
All right, so now let's run through this. So starting from verse 1. But there were also false prophets among the people. So this is connected chapter 1, which talks about the prophets of God are reliable, are trustworthy, because they received the direct revelation from God. For example, Peter, he was an apostle of Jesus, and he received direct revelation from Jesus himself. And that's why we can trust Peter's words. We can trust this Bible. We can trust these words, because this is written from the direct witness of Jesus Christ. And also, all the words written by the prophets, remember, like it was not written out of their personal interpretation, but rather it is guided by the Holy Spirit that helps them to write down the message of God. Peter here basically warns, right? But there's also false prophets, and there's also false teachers. There's false prophets, just as there will be false teachers among you. So now what? They will secretly introduce destructive heresies. Okay, so there are people who are spreading heresies amongst the people among you, even denying the sovereign Lord who bought them. So they spread heresies, they even deny God and bring swift destruction on themselves. So basically, God will judge them because they are doing all this. They're denying God, they're spreading heresies. God is going to punish them. Many will follow their conduct and will bring the way of truth into disrepute. So because there are these false prophets and false teachers, they're spreading these heresies and denying God, that will just compromise the truth, bring the way of truth into disrepute. And in their greed, these teachers will exploit you with fabricated stories. So like the previous chapter, Peter mentioned about there are intricately, designed, made up stories. So here, once again, Peter mentions about these false teachers. They are fabricating stories. In chapter 1, Peter was saying, we're not sharing with you made-up stories. Everything we share with you are first-hand. And here, in contrast, Peter is saying, there are these false teachers. They will exploit you with fabricated stories. Their condemnation has long been hanging over them, and their destruction has not been sleeping. So their condemnation and destruction are coming. How do we know God is going to punish these false teachers and false prophets? Well, here's why. Here are some examples. First, God did not spare angels. So even angels, God did not spare when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment. So this chains of darkness is actually a reference to kind of a Jewish tradition. This is a reference outside the Bible, a book not considered part of the Bible. Okay, but there is also a script written by some people that is kind of considered as a reference text. And Peter here referenced that text. It's called the Book of Enoch. And, in the Book of Enoch, he talked a lot about angels, locking angels in chains of darkness. So this is where that comes from. But I don't recommend you guys to go and read that book because it's apocrypha. That can mess up your understanding about the Bible. You need to have a good grasp, good understanding about the Bible before you even consider reading some apocrypha, the books outside the Bible, because I don't want you guys to treat those as authoritative text. As Christians, we don't treat anything beside the Bible as authoritative. Okay, so it's okay for Bible authors to sometimes reference those books, but it's not okay for us to treat those books as authority because sometimes it contradicts some of the teachings. So this is just a side knowledge, okay? So this is where Peter is referencing this for the sake of making a point that the angels will be condemned. They'll be sent to hell, they'll be chained in darkness, and to be held for judgment. If he did not spare the ancient world when he brought the flood, okay, so God did not spare the angels. This is one reason God is going to condemn the false prophets and teachers. And here's the second reason. Here's the second example. If he did not spare the ancient world, so God did not spare the ancient world. One example, he brought down the flood on his ungodly people. So there was a Noah's ark, there was a flood, but protected Noah. Okay, so that's the contrast. For those sinners, for those ungodly people, God wiped them out. But God, at the same time, protected the righteous people. In this case, it's Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others. So this is 7 people from Noah's family, Noah, his wife, 3 sons, and 3 sons' wives. So that's 8 people altogether. If he condemned the cities, so here's another example of ancient world. He condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. So those 2 were the sin city back in the days. They were very prosperous, but at the same time very sinful, by burning them to ashes. So God, if you read Genesis, you see that there's a story about Sodom and Gomorrah, and God brought down fire onto those cities and burned them into ashes and made them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly. Sodom and Gomorrah and the flood are examples of what's going to happen to the people who are against God, who sin against God. And if he rescued Lot, so this is another righteous person, a righteous man. So he rescued Noah, okay? He also rescued Lot. So 2 righteous people were rescued by God. All the ungodly people are punished, are judged. And Lot, who was distressed by the depraved conduct of the lawless. So this is talking about Lot was being persecuted. So this is a reference to those Christians back in the days. They were being persecuted. So this is in a way to encourage them that do not be afraid. Even though there are a lot of lawless people, there are people who, persecute you. But remember Noah and Lot, because they were saved by God. God protected them. Even Lot was distressed, for that righteous man living among them day after day was tormented in his righteous soul by the lawless deeds he saw and heard. So he was tormented by those lawless, sinful deeds done by those ungodly people. If this is so, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials and to hold the unrighteous for punishment. Okay, so God will rescue the godly from trials and temptation and suffering and, persecutions. At the same time, God is going to punish the unrighteous people on the day of judgment. Okay, so this is talking about the last day. This is especially true of those who follow the corrupt desire of the flesh and despise authority. So this is talking about these false prophets and false teachers. They follow their corrupt desires. They have bad deeds, they follow their flesh, and they despise authority. They despise the authority of God, despise the authority of the apostles, bold and arrogant. So these teachers are bold and arrogant. They are not afraid to heap abuse on celestial beings. Okay, now it gets interesting. So it's saying that these prophets and teachers, they even abuse these celestial beings. Okay, we'll look at this soon. Yet even angels, although they are stronger and more powerful, do not heap abuse on such beings when bringing judgment on them from the Lord. This is talking about these false teachers and false prophets. They were so bold, they even abuse the celestial beings. Even the angels doesn't do that. Okay, so what does it mean heap abuse on celestial beings? What kind of abuse? Are they going to hit or punch, or somehow persecute those beings? Well, I looked up a few different translations. I realized abuse here is kind of like a verbal abuse. Okay, so hip abuse is not really physical abuse because you can't physically abuse an angel. Okay, so let's look at a few more literal translations. Here is LEB, Lexham English Bible. Bold and arrogant, they do not tremble in awe as they blaspheme majestic beings. Beings is probably those angels. So they're blaspheming. They're saying bad things about these majestic beings, which are angels. ESV, they do not tremble as they blaspheme the glorious ones. Okay, so once again, probably angels. And NRSV, slander the glorious ones. And NASB, they revile angelic majesties. So basically, if we look at different translations, we realize that this abuse is kind of a verbal abuse. It's kind of like blaspheming and slandering those angels. Even angels doesn't do that. How do we know that? Jude verse 9 says, but Michael the archangel, when he argued with the devil, disputing concerning the body of Moses, did not dare to pronounce a blasphemous judgment, but said, the Lord rebuke you. So this is saying that apparently the archangel Michael had a dispute with the devil, with Satan maybe, and regarding the body of Moses. And Michael was not happy with Satan. Michael was not happy. But he did not even blaspheme against him. He did not judge the devil, but he only said, let the Lord rebuke you. Let God to judge you. I'm not going to judge you. So even the angels did not blaspheme other angels. Okay? But here, these false teachers and false prophets, they are so bold and arrogant, they even blaspheme the angels. So basically, that's pretty much everything about this passage. So now let's take a moment to reflect on this passage. First is that, do we see any false teachers in our lives? Have you witnessed any false teachers or false prophets in our society? Because there are people who do not obey the authority of the Bible, of God's words, but they make up their own message. They make up their own ideas, right? So that's one thing we need to reflect on. The other thing is, it's really important that for us to realize, although this whole passage talks about judgment on those false prophets and false teachers, but it also specifically mentioned God protected Noah and God rescued Lot. So protected Noah and rescued Lot. So this is very important. That gives us hope that when Christians being persecuted, being abused, and when we are planted amongst sinners, maybe we live in the world, we go into a place where there are lots of ungodly people, and that may make us feel uncomfortable. You know, sometimes you hear people swearing, people, blaspheming God, saying things that we feel uncomfortable. So just like how Lot was tormented when he see all these unrighteous deeds and lawlessness. But the good news is that God is going to deliver us. God is going to save us, rescue us from this trial, and God will one day punish those people. It is not our job to take revenge or to punish those people. But what we need to do, I think, is to stay focused, living out our righteousness in God, and don't give up on the hope. How can we tell if someone's preaching is in line with the gospel? How do you discern that? So that concludes our daily devotion for today. If you have experienced false teachers in your life, make sure you leave the comment down below and share with everyone how you have experienced the false teachers and how did you recognize and discern the false teaching, so that everyone can benefit from your experience. And make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to this channel, and I will see you tomorrow.